Oh hey there, so in this video I'm going to be giving you some tips and advice how to approach lighting in your wildlife photography. You know, we're coming into spring and summer now, and one of the problems I face is that there's so much more light during the middle of the day and the sun is much higher. So for me this always kind of puts me off doing photography a bit during spring and summer, but I think there are some important tips that you can take away from this. I'm going to give you some examples of how to get good lighting in your shots, what conditions to go out in, and also some things to avoid. So yeah, let's get into it. So my first tip is actually something to avoid. It's avoid shooting in harsh direct sunlight, particularly around the middle of the day, but really any time up until sort of golden hour. The light just tends to be too bright, too harsh, and it'll just wash out all of the detail on your subject. It also renders the background pretty harshly because you'll get harsh variations between light and shade. But don't worry, of course I'm going to tell you how you can still shoot in the middle of the day if you want to, and it's something that I'm doing today, so let me tell you about it. So that brings me on to my second tip, which is to find some shade. I've just stepped into the shade and you can see the lighting is now much more soft. It's a lot more flattering of a look. It's also going to cut out those harsh shadows. So I like to find shade whenever I can when it's sunny, because you can still shoot and get nice images. And you want to set your camera's white balance to shade if possible. That's going to give you more natural looking colors, or you can just use auto white balance. But obviously there are some limits to this. If you're going to go into like a dark forest, you will need to start pushing your ISO up and up. So find some shade, but ideally it's what I'm in right now is called open shade. There isn't really a lot of cover above me, so I'm getting lit by the sky. So yeah, if it's sunny, find some shade. This is one of my favorite ways to shoot. So then for my next tip, what are we on, number 3? Don't be afraid to shoot on overcast days. In fact, I think overcast lighting can sometimes be some of the best lighting. It's kind of underrated in that way. Obviously, if it's really dark and overcast, you might have trouble with your ISO climbing up a bit, but sometimes you get this nice, even overcast light. You'll have no harsh shadows in your scene, all the lighting will be really soft and it'll be nice and white. And you should set your white balance to cloudy if you're in overcast conditions. And quite often what you'll find is that even though it's overcast and it seems to be even lighting, that you'll actually have one side of the sky will be brighter than the other. So when you're approaching your subject, if you have the option to try and get a bit more on one side than the other, use that to your advantage. One little tip I like to give is that if you're not sure about the lighting, hold up your hand and look at the front and look at the back, and you'll soon be able to tell if the lighting is brighter on this side or this side. And you might say, well, overcast lighting is boring because it's so flat, but I would say that just leaves you open to a bit more creativity in your shot. You'll have to think a bit more about your composition, try and position yourself so that your background is a different color and shade to your subject so that it pops out. Alright, and so for my next tip, I think this is number 4, shoot in golden hour. I think almost everyone says this, you probably already knew it, but it is an important one. You can get away with direct sunlight when the sun is really low and it starts creating this nice orange haze through the atmosphere. This probably depends a bit on where you are in the world, but here in the UK, in the summer, golden hour is really short because the sun is high up in the sky and it basically goes straight down to the horizon. Whereas in winter, it's much more at an angle, so as it goes down to the horizon, there's a lot more time for golden hour. So golden hour is probably closer to 2 hours in winter, which is awesome. But I do find that sometimes golden hour is still a bit harsh, so it's not my favorite time to shoot, but there is definitely a time and a place for it. For example, bird in flight photography, you need bright lighting to keep your shutter speed high, so golden hour is a great way to shoot then. Maybe it's a little bit cliche, but all in all, not a bad time to shoot. The other problem with summer is that to get golden hour in the morning, you have to wake up really, really early, like 4 a.m. Whereas in winter, you can have golden hour at like 8 a.m. in the morning. Anyway, this video isn't supposed to be about my gripes about summer. Yeah, I prefer winter for photography in general, but you can still make it work in summer if you follow these tips. Oh, and another thing you can do when you're shooting in golden hour is use backlighting. So you don't always need the light to be hitting the front of your subject and you're photographing from that side. You can also be on the other side of your subject and you get this cool rim lighting effect around all the fur. So try to use that sometimes, it is a pretty cool look. Okay, I've lost count of what tip I'm on now, but another cool thing and one of my favorite conditions to shoot under is sometimes it's sunny, but there will be a thin layer of cloud. and that basically acts as like a diffusion layer, so you get a lot of directional lighting coming from the sun, but it's much less harsh and softer than it would be normally. So that can be a great way to shoot, even in the middle of the day, but especially when it's getting a little bit lower. So look out for conditions like those. And finally, just as a little bonus tip, I guess, just try to look for interesting conditions. Sometimes when the skies are really stormy, you can have strong sunlight but a dark sky. That'll look really cool. Sometimes when it's raining, you can get really interesting light, and that'll also cause like your subjects to like glisten with the rain. And if it is getting a bit dark, just don't be afraid to drop your shutter speed down. Modern lenses with like VR and IS let you drop your shutter speed really low. We have plenty of modern technology, so use that to your advantage. For example, with the lens I use and the camera body, I'm able to drop the shutter speed down to about 1/60th and still get sharp pictures. So I can basically shoot into quite deep shade and still be able to bring the exposure up nicely and get a fairly clean image. So this is something I try to do as much as I can. Anyway, I hope you like these tips. Let me know down in the comments if you found them useful, or if you have any tips of your own. I'd love to hear them, so please leave them down in the comments. And don't forget to check out my other video, 8 tips for beginner wildlife photographers. I'll put a link to that up here somewhere, up here. Alright, and I hope that helped you out. Yeah, see ya.